Welcome to Lifestyles of the Not Jet Set, the gently satirical travel and tourism show, kind of like those you might see on TV but with less jet fuel. Today, I'm in New Orleans, having arrived here on the Sunset Limited from Amtrak late last night at midnight from southern Texas. As you know, the recipe for this show is about one part history tourism, one part travel entertainment, and one part climate ethics. As I sit here in New Orleans, I find myself reflecting on whether the history part and the climate ethics part contribute to the travel enjoyment, or whether you might see it as, a little bit of a drag. So, this YouTube series was recently described in an essay on LitHub by the writer and teacher Amy Benson, who called it a charmingly evangelical YouTube travel series in which we extol the virtues of the places we can reach by rail or bike. I was tempted to be unsure whether calling it evangelical was actually praise, even with the modifier charmingly. But I have to recognize the element of truth in what Amy Benson said. There's a certain literal sense in evangelical, as you can see from the Cathedral of St. Louis right here behind me, a wonderful 1850s era building that replaced an earlier church that had been here since the 18th century. And you can recognize that on these episodes, I often find myself connecting with both the history and the contemporary culture and community of a place through their churches. But evangelical also might be fair in the broader sense that I'm not here just to entertain, but that I might be trying to persuade you of something. So I happened to, by coincidence, to be here in New Orleans on Juneteenth, June 19th, the celebration of the 1865 liberation from slavery at the end of the Civil War in nearby southern Texas, where I was just last night. I took a fascinating history tour, a music history tour this afternoon, taking in sights related to Fats Domino and Little Richard, Louis Armstrong, Mahalia Jackson, and many more. And a highlight was passing through Congo Square, where the Juneteenth celebration in New Orleans was today. It's the place where enslaved people gathered for centuries to make music, and it's a holy place in the origin story for the history of jazz in the United States. In Benson's essay, titled Snapshots of the End of Travel, on trying to enter a personal no-fly zone, she reflects on her own childhood and youth in a family that traveled widely, but without really paying attention to the painful parts of the history of the places she traveled through. She gives the example of going to Central Europe without noticing the Holocaust much, or going to Northern Ireland without noticing the Troubles much. A similar issue arises here, being in New Orleans on Juneteenth. Does paying attention in this show to the history of slavery and oppression in the United States undermine the joy of a travel show, or does it actually in some way help? New Orleans is famous among millions of visitors as a place for wild partying and abandonment. I may be able to put a clip on later tonight from a trip to Bourbon Street to see maybe jazz. There's a venue I like called Fritzl's. I feel like on this show, if I were really in the know, I would be saying locations a little further afield, but this is a place I've enjoyed in the past and would look forward to going again this evening.
Thank you so much. All right.
New Orleans music, meaning jazz, but also second line brass street music, and even bounce, the frenetic New Orleans contribution to hip hop, seem at first glance like abandoned, upbeat music, but there's such a history of pain, a place of pain that these genres come from if you listen closely. The history guide today explained that the term second line comes from the trip that the brass band would take back from the cemetery, playing upbeat, enjoyable music after a funeral. But the first line that goes with the term second line, the first line was the trip to the cemetery, playing dirges in a slower tempo. So It's hard to understand the upbeat music without having understood what just came before. Today, the weather is 95 degrees Fahrenheit and humid. There are excessive heat warnings all over the media. The city's public health agency has a report on the website explaining at what temperature do admissions to hospitals for heat related conditions start to spike. And it happens to be at about this temperature today. Out of awareness of climate strains come the evangelism of this show. Come to Bourbon Street in New Orleans or other lively party centers at cities around the United States and around the world. For example, in other episodes of the show, you can see Beale Street in Memphis. And just on my travels here just last week, coming by bus from Mexico, I enjoyed a night of social time in the Zona Rosa district of Mexico, which really is quite wild. Don't let the troubles of the world keep you from the music and the party. But if you can find it in your heart, consider for a moment reorienting your own travel lifestyle to be less privileged, to experiment with being less privileged or less insulated or less spendthrift with the world's remaining carbon budget, and see if in fact the difficulty hinders you from enjoying the celebration, or if in its own way it helps you find a deeper emotional connection to the pain, resilience, and joy that really is the source of this music if you listen closely.